Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most beloved Halloween films ever made. This is a movie that started as a box office disappointment, got ignored by critics, and then slowly, quietly, over the course of 3 decades, became one of the most watched Halloween films of all time. We are talking about Hocus Pocus, the 1993 Disney fantasy comedy that has never truly left our screens or our hearts. So sit back, because we are going through every single detail about this film from the very beginning. Overview. Hocus Pocus is a 1993 American horror fantasy comedy film released by Walt Disney Pictures. The film comes entirely from the United States of America. It was directed by Kenny Ortega, written by Neil Cuthbert and Mick Garris, and produced by David Kirshner and Stephen Haft. The story. Now here is something that most people do not know about this film. The idea for Hocus Pocus did not begin as a grand Hollywood production. It began with a simple, quiet moment. Producer David Kirshner was sitting outside one evening with his young daughter when his neighbor's black cat wandered over to them. In that moment, Kirshner invented a bedtime story on the spot, telling his daughter that the cat was once a young boy who had been transformed into a feline by 3 witches 300 years ago. That single imaginative thought planted the seed. The script was first written by Mick Garris and was purchased by Walt Disney Pictures all the way back in 1984. At that time, the project was titled Disney's Halloween House, and its tone was far darker and scarier than the final version we know today. The protagonists in that early draft were all 12 years old. Over the years, the script went through multiple rewrites to make it more comedic and more family-friendly. 2 of the young main characters were rewritten as teenagers. Despite all of this development work, the production kept getting stalled and delayed. It sat in development for almost a full decade. That all changed in 1992, when legendary actress Bette Midler read the script and expressed genuine interest in being part of the project. The moment she said yes, everything moved forward. Midler herself. There is also a fascinating piece of casting history attached to this film. Director Kenny Ortega met with a young actor named Leonardo DiCaprio about playing the lead role of Max. Ortega was reportedly very impressed by DiCaprio's audition. However, DiCaprio was unavailable at the time because he was already committed to filming What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and so the role went to Omri Katz instead. Additionally, actress Rosie O'Donnell was offered the role of one of the witches, specifically Mary Sanderson, but she turned it down because she did not want to portray a villainous character. The film is set in the iconic town of Salem, Massachusetts, which is one of the most historically significant locations in American history when it comes to witch trials and folklore. However, the majority of the actual filming did not take place there. Most of the movie was shot on sound stages in Burbank, California, with only the daytime outdoor scenes filmed on location in Salem and the nearby town of Marblehead, Massachusetts, over a period of 2 weeks. Filming as a whole ran from October 12, 1992 to February 10, 1993. Plot details. The story opens in the year 1693 in Salem, Massachusetts. A young teenager named Thackeray Binks wakes up to discover that his little sister Emily has gone missing. He immediately suspects something is terribly wrong and rushes into the dark woods to find her. He urges his friend Elijah to hurry back to the village and alert the town elders. Meanwhile, Thackeray presses forward alone and eventually finds a mysterious cottage deep in the forest. Inside, he discovers 3 aging sisters who are witches. Their names are Winifred, Mary, and Sarah Sanderson. The 3 of them are gathered around a large cauldron, brewing a powerful and dark potion. Winifred, the eldest and most powerful of the 3, explains that this potion has the ability to restore their youth when consumed by a child. Emily has already been captured and is being used for exactly this purpose. Thackeray desperately tries to intervene and save his sister, but he is no match for the combined power of the 3 witches. He is quickly overpowered by Winifred. The sisters proceed to drain Emily's life force entirely, using it to restore their own youthfulness. As punishment for Thackeray's interference, Winifred casts a powerful curse upon him, transforming him into a black cat. He is condemned to remain in this feline form forever, immortal, unable to die, and forced to live with the guilt of having failed to save his sister for eternity. Shortly after, the enraged townspeople of Salem arrive at the cottage. They have been alerted by Elijah, and they carry torches and demand justice. The Sanderson sisters are arrested, tried, and condemned to be executed by hanging. Just before the execution is carried out, Winifred casts one final curse. The story then jumps forward 300 years to the present day of 1993. A teenage boy named Max Dennison has just moved to Salem from Los Angeles with his family, and he is deeply unhappy about it. He struggles to fit in at his new school and is not at all interested in Salem's obsession with its witch history. He considers the whole thing to be silly superstition. He has a younger sister named Danny who is enthusiastic and full of energy, and there is a girl at school named Allison who Max is clearly interested in romantically. On Halloween night, Danny convinces Max to take her trick-or-treating. The night leads the group to the old Sanderson cottage, which has been turned into a museum of sorts. Allison joins them there. In a moment of showing off and disbelief, Max lights the black flame candle inside the cottage, unknowingly fulfilling Winifred's ancient prophecy. The candle works. The three Sanderson sisters are instantly resurrected back into the living world, confused but wicked and eager to cause chaos. The witches quickly realize they are in a new and strange century. They have until sunrise to brew their youth-restoring potion and consume the life force of a child. If they cannot accomplish this before the sun rises, they will die permanently, as their resurrection is only temporary and lasts for one night. Winifred, sharp and calculating, immediately begins plotting. Sarah, ditzy and musical, uses her enchanting singing voice to lure children toward the witches. Mary, clumsy but loyal, serves as Winifred's devoted follower. Max, Danny, Allison, and the immortal cat Binks form an unlikely team and spend the entire Halloween night trying to outsmart and stop the three sisters. The group manages to steal Winifred's powerful spell book, which is a sentient book bound in human skin and containing all of her most dangerous spells. Without the book, the witches cannot easily brew their potion. The chase that follows takes the group through Salem's Halloween celebrations, into a graveyard, and even to a packed Halloween party at a city hall where the Sanderson sisters disguise themselves as entertainers and cast a spell on the entire crowd of adults, making them dance uncontrollably through the night so they cannot help the children. In the graveyard, Binks leads the kids to the grave of Billy Butcher's son, a man who was once Winifred's lover, and whom she poisoned and buried with his lips sewn shut after she caught him with Sarah. The kids dig up Billy and he awakens as a zombie. Despite his undead appearance, Billy turns out to be kind and helpful. He cuts open his sewn-up lips and becomes an ally to the children against the very witches who killed him. The climax of the film brings everyone back together in a final confrontation. Max makes a desperate and dangerous decision to drink the youth potion himself in order to keep it away from the witches and protect Danny. He puts his own life at risk to save his sister. Winifred, frantic and furious at seeing her only chance at immortality about to slip away, attacks Max to try to take the potion back. The final battle plays out as the sun begins to rise over Salem. When the first rays of sunlight hit Winifred, she turns to stone and crumbles to dust. Mary and Sarah, exposed to the same sunlight, disintegrate as well. All three witches are destroyed permanently. In the aftermath, Binks the cat finally finds the peace he has been denied for 300 years. Having seen the witches defeated at last, his curse is lifted. His spirit is released from the cat's body and he reunites with his sister Emily's spirit, who has been waiting for him all along. The two siblings finally pass on together to the afterlife, giving the ending of the film a genuinely emotional and bittersweet weight. Cast. The cast of Hocus Pocus is one of the most celebrated ensembles in Disney live-action history. Bette Midler plays Winifred Sanderson, the leader of the three witch sisters. She is the most powerful, the most cunning, and the most theatrical of the group. Midler brings enormous energy, humor, and genuine menace to the role, and her performance is widely considered the heart of the entire film. Her iconic rendition of the song, "I Put a Spell on You," during the Halloween party sequence is one of the most memorable musical moments in any Disney film. Sarah Jessica Parker plays Sarah Sanderson, the youngest and most whimsical of the three sisters. Sarah is presented as dreamy, childlike, and slightly unhinged, with a hauntingly beautiful singing voice that she uses to lure children. Parker's performance is wonderfully strange and funny, and she clearly had a great deal of fun with the role. Kathy Najimy plays Mary Sanderson, the middle sister. Mary is loud, bumbling, and completely devoted to Winifred. Omri Katz plays Max Dennison, the teenage lead whose skepticism and desire to impress Allison accidentally sets the entire plot in motion. Thora Birch plays Dani Dennison, Max's younger sister, and she delivers one of the strongest child performances in the film, full of wit and warmth. Vanessa Shaw plays Allison, the love interest and the most knowledgeable of the three young heroes about Salem's witch history. Doug Jones plays Billy Butcher's son, the zombie, in a largely fit release date and box office. Hocus Pocus was released in North America on July 16, 1993, by Walt Disney Pictures. The release date itself was considered an unusual choice. Releasing a Halloween-themed film in the middle of summer rather than in October was a decision that many believed hurt the film's performance at the box office. The film opened in fourth place on its opening weekend with approximately $8.1 million. Its second weekend brought in around $5.2 million, and the film eventually fell out of the top 10 entirely. By the end of its domestic theatrical run, the film had grossed approximately $39.5 million in total, which was considered a disappointment, and possibly resulted in Disney losing around $16.5 million during the theatrical run. Critics at the time were not kind to the film either. The film currently holds a 42% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critical consensus describing it as harmlessly hokey but never much more than mediocre. Metacritic assigned it a score of 43 out of 100. Roger Ebert gave it just 1 star. Gene Siskel called it dreadful. However, what happened next is one of the great redemption stories in cinema history. After its release on home video in January 1994, and through years of annual airings on Disney Channel and later Freeform throughout the month of October, the film found its true audience. It became a staple of childhood for an entire generation. By 2018, during its 25th anniversary, viewings of the film during its first week on Freeform alone averaged 8.2 million viewers. Every October the DVD and Blu-ray sales spike significantly, consistently bringing in over $1 million in home media sales each Halloween season. Disney re-released the film in select theaters in 2023 to celebrate its 30th anniversary, and again in 2024. A sequel titled Hocus Pocus 2 was released on Disney Plus on September 30, 2022, with all 3 original lead actresses returning to their roles. A third film is currently in development. The musical score for the film was composed and conducted by John Debney. James Horner was originally scheduled to score the film, but became unavailable at the last minute, leaving Debney with only 2 weeks to compose the entire score. Horner did, however, contribute the haunting theme known as "Come Little Children," performed by Sarah Jessica Parker's character in the film, which has become one of the most recognized pieces of music associated with Halloween in popular culture. Trailer info. The original theatrical trailer for Hocus Pocus was released in 1993 alongside Walt Disney Pictures' promotional campaign for the film. The trailer leaned heavily into the comedy and fantasy elements of the story, showcasing the 3 witches in their full theatrical glory, the chaos they unleash on modern-day Salem, and the wild Halloween night adventure that follows. Bette Midler's commanding presence as Winifred Sanderson was front and center in the promotional material, which made sense given that her involvement was the reason the film got made at all. The trailer highlighted the film's blend of spooky atmosphere and broad comedy, positioning it as a family-friendly Halloween adventure. Legacy and final thoughts. What makes Hocus Pocus so remarkable is not what it was when it came out. It is what it became over time. A film that was written off as a failure in 1993 has outlasted the opinions of every critic who dismissed it. It is now a genuine cultural institution, a film that people watch every single October not just out of habit but out of real affection. The performances of Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy have aged into something genuinely iconic. The story is warm, funny, and unexpectedly emotional in its final moments. The setting of Salem gives it an atmosphere that no other Halloween film quite captures in the same way. And the music from "I Put a Spell on You" to "Come Little Children" has permanently embedded itself into the Halloween season for millions of people. This is a film about family, about bravery, about the consequences of skepticism, and about what it means to finally find peace after centuries of guilt and regret. It wraps all of that in broomstick rides, zombie sidekicks, and 3 of the most entertainingly wicked witches ever put on screen. That is Hocus Pocus. That is why it is still here, still being watched, and still being loved 30 years after everyone said it had failed. The complete story of Hocus Pocus, 1993. Part 1. The beginning in 1693 Salem. The story of Hocus Pocus begins not in the modern world but in the distant past, in the year 1693, in the small and deeply superstitious town of Salem, Massachusetts. It is the very early hours of the morning, and the town is still and quiet under a dark sky. A young teenage boy named Thackeray Binks is fast asleep in his family home. He shares a close and loving bond with his little sister Emily, who is young, innocent, and full of curiosity about the world around her. On this particular morning, something is deeply wrong. Thackeray wakes up suddenly and notices that Emily is not where she is supposed to be. Her bed is empty. He looks around and quickly realizes she has left the house entirely. Outside, he catches a distant glimpse of his little sister walking in a trance-like state toward the dark and dense forest that sits on the edge of the town. She is not walking of her own free will. She is being drawn forward by something unseen, something magical and sinister pulling her deeper into the woods with every step. Thackeray is immediately terrified. He knows the stories that circulate in Salem about the forest and the dangers that lurk within it. He runs to his friend Elijah and urgently tells him to run back into the town as fast as he can and alert the village elders. He tells Elijah that something terrible is happening and that the adults need to know immediately. Without waiting another moment, Thackeray turns and runs into the forest alone, determined to find Emily and bring her back before whatever is out there can harm her. He runs through the dark trees, pushing through branches and undergrowth, following the direction his sister went. Eventually he comes upon a clearing where a large and ancient-looking cottage stands. The cottage belongs to the Sanderson Sisters, 3 witches who are feared throughout Salem. Thackeray approaches the cottage and peers inside. What he sees stops him cold. Inside the cottage, 3 women are gathered around a large, bubbling cauldron. These are the Sanderson Sisters. The eldest is Winifred Sanderson, a sharp and imperious woman with wild red hair and an almost theatrical sense of command. She is the leader, the most intelligent, and by far the most dangerous of the 3. Beside her is Mary Sanderson, the middle sister, a round and eager woman who follows Winifred's every instruction with absolute devotion and sniffs out children with an almost animal-like sense of smell. And then there is Sarah Sanderson, the youngest sister, beautiful and dreamy. The 3 of them are in the middle of brewing a potion. Winifred explains to her sisters with great excitement that this particular potion, when consumed from a child, will drain that child's life force entirely and transfer it to the witches, restoring their youth and extending their lives. Emily has already been brought to the cottage and is being held there, helpless and unable to resist. Thackeray bursts into the cottage in a desperate attempt to save his sister. He shouts at the witches and tries to physically stop them from harming Emily. But he is just a teenager with no magical abilities, and the three Sanderson sisters are powerful and ancient witches with centuries of dark knowledge behind them. Winifred overpowers him almost effortlessly. She is furious at his interference, but also almost amused by his bravery. The sisters hold him back and proceed with the ritual. They force the potion upon Emily. The young girl's life force is drained from her body. Emily collapses and dies, her youth and vitality absorbed by the three witches. The sisters are transformed, their aged and wrinkled appearances giving way to younger, more vibrant versions of themselves. The potion has worked exactly as intended. Emily is gone. Winifred then turns her full attention to Thackeray. She cannot simply let him go, not after what he has witnessed, and not after what he tried to do. As punishment for his interference, she casts a powerful curse upon him. She transforms him into a black cat. He will remain in this form forever, cursed to be immortal, unable to die, unable to age, unable to tell anyone what happened to his sister or seek help. He will live with his guilt and his grief for as long as time itself continues. It is one of the cruelest punishments imaginable, not death, but an eternity of helpless existence. Shortly after, the townspeople of Salem arrive at the cottage. Elijah has done exactly what Thackeray asked and raised the alarm. The villagers come carrying torches, their faces set with anger and fear. They arrest the Sanderson sisters on the spot. The witches are taken before the town and put on trial. They are found guilty and condemned to death by hanging. Thackeray, now trapped in the body of a black cat, watches all of this unfold helplessly. He brushes up against his own father's leg in his feline form, but his father does not recognize him and pushes him aside. Just before the hanging is carried out, Winifred, defiant and furious to the last, speaks a curse over Salem. She declares that on a night when All Hallows' Eve and a full moon coincide, if a virgin lights the black flame candle inside their cottage, the three Sanderson sisters will be resurrected and walk the earth once more. The candle is a specific magical artifact that exists in the cottage, and its power is tied to this prophecy. The three sisters are then hanged, and their bodies go still. But the curse remains. The black flame candle sits in the cottage. Thackeray, now condemned to guard it for eternity and make sure no one ever lights it, takes up his post. 300 years pass. Part 2: Modern-day Salem and the arrival of Max Dennison. The story now moves forward 3 centuries to Halloween 1993 in Salem, Massachusetts. The town is alive with decorations, costumes, and the excitement of Halloween night. Salem leans heavily into its witch trial history as a source of tourism and local pride, and every October the entire town transforms into a celebration of that dark past. Into this world arrives Max Dennison, a teenage boy who has just relocated to Salem from Los Angeles, California, with his parents and his younger sister Danny. Max is deeply unhappy about the move. He misses his friends, he misses the city, and he has absolutely no patience for Salem's obsession with its witch history. He thinks the whole thing is ridiculous superstition and has no interest in fitting in or embracing the local culture. He is the kind of teenager who is too cool to admit he cares about anything, which of course means he cares deeply about everything but refuses to show it. At school, Max notices a girl named Allison. She is smart, warm, and completely at ease in Salem because she has lived there her whole life. Her family actually has a deep historical connection to Salem's witch trial era. Max is immediately and obviously attracted to her, but his attempts to talk to her are awkward and do not go particularly well. 2 local bullies named Jay and Ernie, who go by the nickname Ice, also take an instant dislike to Max and make his first days in Salem even more unpleasant. When Halloween night arrives, Max's parents go out to a costume party of their own, leaving Max in charge of his little sister Danny. Danny is the opposite of her brother in almost every way. She is enthusiastic, sharp-tongued, funny, and completely in love with Halloween. She wants to go trick-or-treating and she wants to go now. Max is unenthused and would rather be anywhere else, but he has no choice. He takes Danny out into the Halloween night, and the two of them move through the decorated streets of Salem. In a stroke of luck that Max does not initially appreciate, the night leads them to Allison's house. Allison opens the door, and she and Danny immediately get along well. Max, trying to impress her, mentions that he has heard about the old Sanderson cottage on the edge of town and suggests they go check it out. This is partly genuine curiosity, and partly an attempt to seem interesting in front of Allison. Allison agrees, somewhat to Max's surprise, and the three of them head toward the cottage together. Part 3. The black flame candle is lit. The old Sanderson cottage has been turned into a kind of museum dedicated to the history of the three witches. It sits on the edge of Salem, old and creaking and atmospheric, filled with artifacts and relics from the sisters' time. When the three teenagers arrive, the place is closed and locked up for the night, but they manage to get inside anyway. Inside the cottage, Max and the others look around at the old artifacts and displays. There is an old book, Winifred's spell book, encased behind glass. And there, on a stand, is the black flame candle. Allison knows the legend of the candle well. She tells Max and Danny what it means and what it is said to do. Max, entirely dismissive and wanting to seem unbothered, walks over to the candle and lights it. The moment the flame catches, the temperature in the room drops. Strange things begin to happen around them. The candle burns with a dark, eerie light. And then, with a rush of energy and a dramatic burst of power, the three Sanderson sisters come roaring back to life. Winifred appears first, gasping and furious, and immediately taking stock of her surroundings. Mary and Sarah follow close behind. The sisters look around the cottage in confusion and disbelief. 300 years have passed and the world they knew is completely unrecognizable. But Winifred is sharp and quick-thinking. She immediately understands what has happened. The candle was lit. The prophecy has been fulfilled. They are back. And then Winifred realizes something even more critical. Their resurrection is not permanent. They have been brought back for one night only, the night of Halloween. When the sun rises in the morning, they will cease to exist permanently unless they can brew their youth-restoring potion and drain the life force of at least one child before dawn. They have a limited amount of time, and they must work quickly. Winifred reaches for her spell book immediately, because without it she cannot recreate the potion from memory. However, Max grabs the book first, and the three teenagers run out of the cottage with the book in hand, taking the witch's most powerful tool with them. The sisters give chase, and the wild Halloween night chase through Salem begins. Part 4. The Sanderson Sisters loose in modern Salem. The Sanderson sisters emerge into modern Salem on Halloween night, which is simultaneously the best and worst time for three witches to be walking the streets. On one hand, everyone is in costume, and no one gives them a second look, assuming the three bizarre-looking women are just very committed to their outfits. On the other hand, the modern world is utterly alien to them, and they have no idea how anything works. The sisters attempt to fly, but their broomsticks were left in the cottage. Winifred ends up riding a vacuum cleaner through the air. Mary commandeers a mop. Sarah flies on her own broom retrieved from somewhere in the cottage. They look absolutely ridiculous soaring over Salem on their improvised flying devices, but they are also genuinely dangerous and increasingly desperate. Meanwhile, Max, Danny, and Allison are running through the Halloween crowds trying to stay ahead of the witches and figure out a plan. They have the spell book with them, which they know is critical. The book itself is a remarkable and deeply unsettling object. It is sentient. It has a single eye on its cover that opens and blinks, and watches everything happening around it. It responds to Winifred's voice and to dark magic, but it will not help anyone else. The children carry it carefully, knowing that as long as they have it, the witches cannot easily recreate the potion. During the chaos of the night, Max and Danny have a run-in with the two bullies Jay and Ice, who have been following them around Salem. This leads to a confrontation, but the witches arrive and the situation becomes far more complicated. Jay and Ice, having no idea what they are dealing with, end up being captured by the Sanderson Sisters, who cage them up and hang them from the ceiling of the cottage, where they remain for most of the rest of the night, scared and helpless. The sisters, frustrated by their inability to catch the children and recover the book, decide to try a different approach. Winifred, always the strategist, leads her sisters to Salem City Hall, where a massive Halloween party is taking place. Hundreds of adults in costume are dancing and having a wonderful time inside. The three witches walk into the party and the crowd assumes they are entertainers of some kind. No one questions them for a moment. Winifred takes to the stage and performs a bewitching and powerful rendition of the song, "I Put a Spell on You." It is an extraordinary performance, wild and theatrical and magnetic. But it is also literal witchcraft. As Winifred sings, every adult in the room falls under her spell. The entire crowd begins dancing uncontrollably. They cannot stop. They cannot sit down. They cannot help themselves or anyone else. Every parent in Salem is now locked in City Hall, dancing helplessly until they drop from exhaustion. The children of Salem are completely unprotected and vulnerable for the rest of the night, which is exact. Max, Danny, and Allison watch this unfold in horror. They know that with every adult in the city enchanted and every child now unprotected, the witches have a clear path to do exactly what they came back to do. The three friends understand that they are on their own. No adult can help them. It is just the three of them, a stolen spell book, and a talking immortal cat against 3 centuries-old witches who are growing more powerful and more desperate with every passing hour. Part 5: Billy Butcherson Rises and the Graveyard Confrontation. Seeking help and a place to think, the children head to the old Salem cemetery. It is dark and overgrown and deeply atmospheric, the kind of graveyard that feels heavy with old history. Binks the cat leads them there with purpose, because he knows something the children do not yet know. In the graveyard, there is a specific grave that matters. It belongs to a man named Billy Butcherson. Billy has a long and tragic history with Winifred Sanderson. He was once her lover, a man she cared about in her own dark and possessive way. But when Winifred discovered that Billy had been seen with her sister Sarah, she was consumed with jealousy and fury. She poisoned him, killing him, and then as a final act of cruelty she sewed his lips shut with a dull needle so that even in death he could not speak her secrets, or her sins. She buried him in this cemetery, and he has been here ever since. The children, following Binks's guidance, managed to open Billy's grave. Billy Butcherson rises from the earth as a zombie, centuries of dirt and decay falling from him as he stands upright. He is terrifying to look at, pale and rotting and sewn-mouthed, and the children's first instinct is to run. But Billy does not attack them. He stands still, confused and blinking, trying to orient himself. He is not a mindless creature. He is still, in some essential way, the man he was in life. Billy reaches up to his own face and, with a gesture of quiet determination, pulls the old stitching from his lips. The thread that has kept his mouth sealed for 300 years comes free. Billy takes his first breath and his first words are not a threat, but something approaching exasperation. He has spent 3 centuries underground and he has absolutely no love for the woman who put him there. When he realizes that Winifred is back and that these children are trying to stop her, he makes a decision. He is going to help them. This moment is one of the most unexpectedly charming turns in the entire film. Billy Butcherson, the decomposing zombie, becomes one of the heroes of the story. He has every reason to hate Winifred Sanderson and no loyalty to her whatsoever. He joins Max, Danny, and Allison, and together the now 5-member group prepares for the final confrontation. The Sanderson sisters are still hunting through Salem, still searching for a child they can use to brew their potion. Sarah has been using her enchanting voice to try to draw children out of their homes and into the streets. Her singing drifts through the Halloween night like a ghostly melody, and some of the children of Salem begin moving toward it in a trance. The situation is becoming genuinely dangerous. The witches are getting closer and closer to having everything they need. Part 6. The Final Confrontation. The final act of the night brings all of the pieces together in one last desperate confrontation. Max, Danny, Allison, Binks, and Billy converge on the witches for a climactic battle that moves through the streets, and eventually back to an open space where the rising sun will determine the outcome. Winifred and her sisters are relentless. They have already come so close to achieving what they came back for, and they are not going to give up now. Winifred's focus is entirely on getting the spell book back and obtaining a child. She is furious and calculating in equal measure, snapping at her sisters when they make mistakes and driving the pursuit forward with terrifying single-mindedness. At a critical moment in the confrontation, the witches manage to get hold of Danny. Max's little sister, who has been brave and sharp all night, is captured by Winifred. The situation becomes immediately desperate. Danny is the child Winifred needs to complete her potion and restore permanent youth to herself and her sisters. With Danny in her grasp, Winifred has the upper hand. Max is faced with an impossible decision. In a moment of genuine bravery and love for his sister, he makes a choice that defines his entire character. He grabs the youth-restoring potion, which the witches have managed to brew with what ingredients they had, and he drinks it himself. He is a teenager, technically still a child, and the potion works on him. By drinking it, he removes it from the witch's reach entirely, and puts his own life at risk. He is essentially offering himself in place of his sister, gambling that he can find a way out before the potion does what it is designed to do. Winifred is enraged beyond words. She releases Danny and turns all of her fury on Max. The potion is inside him, and she needs it. She launches herself at him with everything she has, clawing and reaching and casting spells. The battle between them is desperate and chaotic, and the rest of the group fights off Mary and Sarah at the same time. Billy faces down the sisters who wronged him in life, finally getting something resembling justice. And then, as the final battle rages, the sky on the horizon begins to lighten. The first pale gray light of dawn begins to appear over Salem. The night is ending. Halloween is almost over. And for the Sanderson sisters, the rising sun is a death sentence. Winifred, still fighting desperately, still reaching for Max and for her last chance at survival, is caught by the first rays of sunlight as the sun breaks the horizon. The light strikes her, and she stops. Her body stiffens. The magical energy that has kept her alive through the night drains away in an instant. She turns to stone, rigid and frozen mid-grasp, her expression locked in fury and desperation. And then she crumbles. Winifred Sanderson, the most powerful witch in Salem's history, disintegrates into dust as the sunlight washes over her. Mary and Sarah, exposed to the same light at the same moment, meet the same fate. Mary disappears in a puff. Sarah dissolves into nothing, her laughter cutting off mid-note. The 3 Sanderson sisters are gone. Not sleeping, not waiting, not cursed to return. Gone permanently and completely, destroyed by the very sunrise that ends the one night they were allowed to walk the earth again. Part 7. The Ending and Binks's Freedom. The aftermath of the final confrontation is quiet compared to the chaos of the night. The spell on the adults in City Hall lifts the moment the witches are destroyed. Parents stir and look around, confused about why they are all dancing and what has happened to the hours of the night. Jay and Ice are freed from their cage in the Sanderson cottage. The children of Salem who had been wandering towards Sarah's song begin to wake up from their trance and find their way home. Max, Danny, and Allison stand together in the early morning light. They are exhausted and shaken but alive. They have done what no adult in Salem managed to do. They stopped the Sanderson sisters once and for all. But it is what happens next that gives the film its deepest and most emotional moment. Binks the cat, who has been at Max and Danny's side through the entire night, suddenly grows very still. The immortal curse that Winifred placed on him 300 years ago was tied to the witches themselves. With Winifred destroyed, the curse is finally, completely broken. Binks speaks to Max and Danny one last time. He thanks them. He tells them that they have given him something he has waited 3 centuries for. And then the spirit of Thackeray Binks, the teenage boy who ran into the forest to save his sister and paid for it with an eternity of guilt and exile, rises gently from the body of the cat. The cat's body goes still and quiet on the ground, no longer animated by the immortal curse. And there, in the soft morning light of a Salem cemetery, the spirit of Thackeray Binks is reunited with the spirit of his little sister Emily, who has been waiting for him all along. The two of them, brother and sister separated by the cruelty of Winifred Sanderson 300 years ago, finally stand together again. Emily is not angry or sad. She is simply. Max and Danny watch it happen. Danny, who is young enough to believe in what she has just seen and emotionally open enough to feel the full weight of it, is moved to tears. Even Max, who spent the beginning of this night insisting that none of this was real, stands in silence and understands that something genuinely profound and beautiful has just happened in front of him. The Sanderson sisters are gone. Billy Butcher's son, freed from his own curse now that Winifred is destroyed, returns peacefully to his rest. Thackeray Binks is finally free. Salem's long dark chapter with the 3 witches is truly and permanently closed. And Max Dennison, the boy who came to Salem not wanting to be there and not believing in any of it, stands in the early morning light of November 1st having saved the entire town and watched a 300-year-old ghost finally go home. That is the complete story of Hocus Pocus, beginning to end. Here is the complete and detailed life history of the main actors of Hocus Pocus. Bette Midler, Winifred Sanderson. Bette Midler was born on December 1, 1945, in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was born into a Jewish family in a place where Jewish families were extremely rare, and she grew up feeling like an outsider from the very beginning of her life. Her father Fred Midler was a house painter who worked for the United States Navy, and her mother Ruth was a woman who loved movies and music deeply and passed that love directly to her daughter. Bette was named after the actress Bette Davis, which in itself tells you something about the kind of household she grew up in and the kind of aspirations her mother quietly carried for her children. Growing up in Hawaii as a Jewish girl in a predominantly non-Jewish environment shaped Betty's personality in ways that would follow her for the rest of her life. She was always the odd one out, always slightly different from the people around her, and she learned early on to use humor, boldness, and sheer personality as a way of navigating that difference. She was not the most conventionally beautiful girl in any room she walked into, and she knew it, but she was by far the most interesting and the most alive, and she figured out very young that interesting and alive were far more powerful than conventionally beautiful. She attended the University of Hawaii and studied drama there before eventually making the decision that would change everything. She moved to New York City, the beating heart of American performance culture, with very little money and a very large amount of determination. She landed a small role in the original Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof, initially in the ensemble, and eventually worked her way up to playing the role of Seidel. It was her first real taste of professional performing, and it confirmed everything she had suspected about herself. She was meant to be on a stage. But the moment that truly launched Bette Midler into the public consciousness was not Broadway. It was a bathhouse in New York City. In the early 1970s, Midler began performing at the Continental Baths, a gay bathhouse in Manhattan that had become a gathering place for the gay community at a time when that community had very few safe public spaces. Midler performed for audiences of men wrapped in towels, and she gave them everything she had. She was outrageous, warm, funny, and heartbreakingly sincere all at once. She told dirty jokes. She sang standards from the 1940s. She camped and she crooned and she made everyone in the room feel like they were witnessing something genuinely extraordinary. Her pianist at these performances was a young unknown named Barry Manilow, and the two of them together created something electric. Word spread about this woman performing at the Bads, and soon the audiences included people from all walks of life who had heard the rumors and needed to see it for themselves. She earned the nickname the Divine Miss M during this period, a title that captured something essential about her persona, which was simultaneously larger than life and deeply human. She appeared on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show and the response was immediate and overwhelming. America saw her and could not look away. Her debut album The Divine Miss M was released in 1972 and was a massive success, earning a Grammy Award for Best New Artist. Her follow-up albums continued to build her reputation as one of the most distinctive and adventurous voices in popular music. She was not interested in fitting into any one category. She moved between pop, rock, gospel, blues, and theatrical ballads with complete freedom, and her voice, which could be both raw and refined, carried every single thing she asked it to carry. Her film career began in earnest with The Rose in 1979, in which she played a rock and roll singer whose life was spiraling out of control. The performance was devastating in its honesty and its emotional intensity. Midler threw herself into the role completely, and the result was a performance that shocked people who had only known her as a comedic entertainer. She received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress for The Rose, and overnight the world understood that she was not just a performer but a genuine actress of the highest order. Throughout the 1980s she balanced music and film with remarkable energy. She appeared in films including Jinxed, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Ruthless People, Outrageous Fortune, and Big Business. She was consistently funny in her comedic roles, bringing a sharpness and a self-awareness that made her characters feel real even in the broadest comedies. But it was in 1988 that she delivered what many consider to be the greatest dramatic performance of her career, in the film Beaches. She played Cece Bloom, a brash and ambitious entertainer whose friendship with a quieter and more restrained woman forms the emotional center of the film. The story follows the two women across decades and ends in profound grief. Midler was extraordinary, and the song Wind Beneath My Wings, which she performed for the film's soundtrack, became one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade. When she came to Hocus Pocus in 1993, Midler brought everything she had ever learned about performing to the role of Winifred Sanderson. She understood instinctively that Winifred needed to be genuinely funny and genuinely threatening at the same time, and she achieved both with complete ease. Her physical comedy, her vocal range, her theatrical instincts, and her ability to make even the silliest moment feel grounded in something real all came together in a performance that has only grown in stature over time. The film was not a success when it was released, but Midler's performance was always the best thing in it, and as the film found its audience over the following decades, Midler became recognized as the reason the whole thing worked as well as it did. Beyond film and music, Midler has been a significant figure in environmental activism, founding the New York Restoration Project in 1995, an organization dedicated to reclaiming and beautifying neglected public spaces in New York City. She has planted thousands of trees throughout the city's communities and has worked tirelessly to bring green spaces to neighborhoods that had been ignored for decades. She married artist Martin von Hazelberg in 1984, and they have remained married ever since, one of the more enduring partnerships in Hollywood history. They have a daughter named Sophie. Midler has won Grammy Awards, Tony Awards, Emmy Awards, and Golden Globe Awards over the course of her career. She is one of the most decorated and beloved entertainers America has ever produced, and her legacy is as large and as complex and as full of life as the woman herself. Sarah Jessica Parker, Sarah Sanderson. Sarah Jessica Parker was born on March 25, 1965, in Nelsonville, Ohio. She was the fourth of 8 children born to Barbara Parker, a nursery school teacher and occasional portrait painter, and Stephen Parker, an entrepreneur and journalist. The family was large and their financial circumstances were often difficult. There were times during Sarah Jessica's childhood when the family genuinely struggled to make ends meet, and the experience of growing up in a household where money was scarce and creativity was abundant left a deep mark on her. When Sarah Jessica was still a young girl, the family relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio, and it was there that her talent for performance first became visible. She began studying dance and acting at a young age, and it quickly became clear that she had a natural gift. Her mother recognized this and made considerable sacrifices to support her daughter's training and development. The family eventually moved to New Jersey to be closer to New York City and the opportunities it offered for a child with serious performing ambitions. At the age of 11, Sarah Jessica Parker made her Broadway debut in the musical The Innocents. She followed this with a role in the original Broadway production of Annie, joining the cast and performing 8 shows a week while still very much a child. Annie was one of the most popular musicals of its era, and performing in it gave Sarah Jessica an invaluable education in professional theater at an age when most children were simply attending school and doing homework. She was already a working professional in one of the most demanding performance environments in the world before she was even a teenager. She continued her theater work through her adolescence, and eventually began transitioning into television and film. Her first significant television role came in the series Square Pegs, which aired in 1982 and 1983. She played Patty Green, an awkward and socially ambitious teenager trying to navigate high school, and the show gave her a profile in television that her theater work alone could not have provided. The show was cancelled after 1 season, but it introduced her to a much wider audience. Throughout the 1980s, she appeared in a series of films that kept her working and developing as an actress. She had a memorable role in Footloose in 1984, the hugely popular musical drama about a small town that bans dancing. She appeared in Girls Just Want to Have Fun in 1985, a light and energetic comedy that became a favorite among younger audiences. She also appeared in LA Story in 1991 alongside Steve Martin, and in Honeymoon in Vegas in 1992. These roles established her as a capable and appealing screen presence, but she had not yet found the role that would define her career. Her personal life during the 1980s included a long and public relationship with actor Robert Downey Jr., which was intense and ultimately difficult given the personal struggles Downey was experiencing during that period. She later began a relationship with actor Matthew Broderick, whom she married in 1997. Their marriage has endured through decades of enormous public scrutiny and remains one of the most discussed relationships in Hollywood, partly because both of them are such significant figures in their respective areas of the entertainment industry. They have 3 children together, a son named James Wilkie and twin daughters named Marion and Tabitha. When she took the role of Sarah Sanderson in Hocus Pocus in 1993, she brought a very specific and unusual energy to the character. Sarah Sanderson is not particularly intelligent, and not particularly dangerous in the way Winifred is, but she is strange and unpredictable and has a kind of otherworldly quality that Parker captured perfectly. Her physical performance, all wide eyes and floating movements and sudden bursts of childlike enthusiasm, made the character genuinely memorable and often very funny in a way that felt entirely different from anything else she had done before. But the role that transformed Sarah Jessica Parker from a well-known actress into a genuine cultural phenomenon came a few years after Hocus Pocus. In 1998, she was cast as Carrie Bradshaw in the HBO series Sex and the City. The show followed 4 women living in New York City navigating relationships, careers, friendship, and identity, and it became one of the most talked about and influential television series of its era. Parker's performance as Carrie was central to everything. Carrie was a character who could be self-absorbed and frustrating and deeply human and enormously relatable all at the same time, and Parker played every single layer of her with complete commitment and remarkable skill. Sex and the City ran for 6 seasons and concluded in 2004, followed by 2 feature films. The show won Parker multiple Golden Globe Awards and Emmy Awards and made her one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Her fashion choices both on and off screen became the subject of enormous public fascination, and she is consistently cited as one of the most stylish women in the entertainment industry. She has worked with numerous fashion houses and designers, and her influence on popular culture during the late 1990s and 2000s was profound and wide-reaching. She returned to the role of Carrie Bradshaw in the revival series And Just Like That, which premiered in 2021 on HBO Max and continued to explore the characters in their later stages of life. The revival was eagerly anticipated by fans of the original series, and Parker's return to the role was greeted with significant enthusiasm. She continues to work in film and television and remains one of the most prominent and respected figures in American entertainment. Kathy Najimy, Mary Sanderson. Kathy Najimy was born on February 6, 1957, in San Diego, California. She grew up in a Lebanese-American family in a working-class neighborhood, the daughter of a father who worked hard to provide for his family and a mother who was warm and funny and full of life. Najimy has spoken extensively throughout her career about the influence her mother had on her sense of humor, and her ability to find the comedy in any situation no matter how difficult it might be. Growing up Lebanese American in California in the 1960s and 1970s also gave her an early understanding of what it meant to exist between cultures, to be part of a community that was not always fully seen or represented in the mainstream. She was drawn to performing from a very young age and threw herself into theater as a teenager with an intensity that made it clear this was not a hobby but a vocation. She moved to Los Angeles after high school and began working her way through the city's theater scene, taking any role she could find and learning the craft of performance from the inside out. She was not immediately recognized as a star. She spent years building her skills in rooms that were not always full, doing the kind of foundational work that rarely gets talked about but that makes everything else possible. The project that first brought Najimy to widespread attention was a 2-woman show she created and performed with her longtime friend and collaborator M.O. Gaffney. The show was called M.O. and Me and M.O., and later became known simply as The Kathy and M.O. Show. The 2 women wrote all of the material themselves and performed a series of comedic sketches that ranged from sharp social satire to deeply personal character work. The show was a celebration of women's lives and women's perspectives at a time when those perspectives were often marginalized or ignored in mainstream comedy. It ran off Broadway and eventually transferred to Broadway itself, earning the 2 women an Obie Award, which is one of the most prestigious honors in American theater for work outside the mainstream commercial stage. The Kathy and M.O. Show also became a series of HBO specials, which brought Najimy's particular brand of humor to a much wider television audience. She was funny in a way that felt completely natural and unforced, warm and physical, and completely committed to every character she created. There was nothing tentative about her performing. She went all the way, every time, and audiences responded to that total commitment with enormous affection. Her film career gained significant momentum in 1992 when she was cast in Sister Act alongside Whoopi Goldberg. She played Sister Mary Patrick, an enthusiastic and joyful nun who is part of the choir that Goldberg's character takes over and transforms. The film was a massive box office success, and Sister Mary Patrick became one of the most beloved supporting characters in it. Najimy's comedic timing and her ability to generate warmth and genuine likability in a relatively small amount of screen time impressed everyone who saw the film. A sequel, Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit, followed in 1993 and she returned for that as well. When she was offered the role of Mary Sanderson in Hocus Pocus in 1993, Najimy had to navigate the fact that the role was a villain, something she had some reservations about. Rosie O'Donnell had already turned the part down for exactly this reason. But Najimy approached Mary not as a straightforwardly wicked character but as a deeply loyal and somewhat hapless one, a woman whose primary defining characteristic is her absolute devotion to her eldest sister Winifred. Mary is not cruel so much as she is completely incapable of any thought or action that Winifred has not approved of first. Najimy found the comedy in that dependency and made Mary one of the funniest and most endearing of the three sisters. Beyond her acting career, Kathy Najimy has been one of the most consistently vocal and committed activists in Hollywood. She has been a passionate advocate for LGBTQ rights for decades, at a time when such advocacy was far more professionally risky than it is today. She has marched, spoken publicly, and used her platform consistently and without apology to support equality and human dignity. She has also been involved in feminist causes and organizations throughout her career and has spoken extensively about the importance of representation and inclusion in the entertainment industry. She has worked extensively in voice acting, most notably providing the voice of Peggy Hill in the long-running animated series King of the Hill, which aired from 1997 to 2010. Peggy Hill is a character of tremendous comic specificity, a woman of complete and unwavering self-confidence who is hilariously unaware of the gap between her self-image and reality. Najimy brought enormous warmth and precision to the role across 13 seasons, and the character became one of the most beloved in the history of American animated television. She married actor and comedian Dan Finnerty in 1995, and they have a daughter named Samia. She has remained one of the most beloved and respected figures in American comedy and activism, a woman whose career has been built on complete creative honesty and a refusal to compromise on the things she believes in. Omri Katz, Max Dennison. Omri Katz was born on May 30, 1976, in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in the San Fernando Valley in a family with Israeli roots, and his childhood was shaped by the particular culture of Los Angeles in the late 1970s and 1980s, a world of sunshine and entertainment industry proximity where becoming an actor was not an unusual ambition for a young person to carry. He began his acting career as a child, getting his start in commercials and small television appearances before landing the role that would first make him recognizable to a wide audience. In 1988, at the age of 12, he was cast in the role of John Ross Ewing III, known as John Ross, in the legendary prime-time soap opera Dallas. Dallas was one of the most watched television programs in the world at the time, a glossy and dramatic saga about a wealthy Texas oil family, and appearing in it gave Katz a level of mainstream visibility that very few child actors achieved. He played the son of the iconic J.R. Ewing, one of the most famous villains in television history, and he held his own alongside a cast of experienced and formidable adult actors. He appeared in Dallas from 1988 until 1991. His other major television role during his childhood came in the series Erie, Indiana, which aired in 1991 and 1992. In this show he played Marshall Teller, a teenager who has moved with his family to the strange and supernatural town of Erie, Indiana, and who spends each episode investigating the bizarre and paranormal events that seem to be a normal part of life there. The show was quirky and inventive and ahead of its time in many ways, blending comedy and light horror in a way that anticipated later shows that would explore similar territory. It developed a devoted following, and Katz's performance as the curious and skeptical Marshall was central to its appeal. When he was cast as Max Dennison in Hocus Pocus in 1993, Katz was 17 years old and had already accumulated more professional acting experience than most adult actors. His portrayal of Max was grounded and natural, avoiding the temptation to play the character's skepticism and attitude as simple teenage clichés. Max is a boy who is genuinely displaced and genuinely lonely, and underneath his cool exterior is someone who cares deeply about his family, and who is capable of real bravery when the situation demands it. Katz brought all of that to the role with a quietness that served the film well against the much louder and more theatrical performances of the three actresses playing the witches. After Hocus Pocus, Katz's acting career gradually slowed. He appeared in a few additional television and film projects in the mid-1990s, but was not able to sustain the momentum of his earlier years. This is a pattern that is unfortunately common among child and teenage actors who build significant careers early, and then find it difficult to transition into adult roles in an industry that is not always kind to people in that particular situation. He stepped back from acting significantly by the late 1990s. In his adult life, Katz pursued interests outside of the entertainment industry, most notably in the field of hairstyling and cosmetology. He built a career as a hairstylist and found a quieter and more private life away from the public attention he had known as a child and teenager. He has spoken in interviews about being at peace with the path his life took and about the genuine affection he feels for the work he did when he was young, including Hocus Pocus, which has followed him in the most positive way imaginable as the film's cult status has only grown with each passing decade. Thora Birch, Danny Dennison. Thora Birch was born on March 11, 1982, in Los Angeles, California. She was born into the entertainment industry in the most literal sense possible. Her parents, Jack Birch and Carol Connors, were both involved in the adult film industry before transitioning into mainstream entertainment management, and Thora and her brother Bolt were raised in a household where the business of performance was simply the reality of daily life. She began acting as an infant, appearing in commercials almost from the moment she was old enough to sit up in front of a camera. By the time she was a toddler, she was already a working professional. She appeared in numerous national advertising campaigns throughout her very early childhood, building a level of comfort in front of cameras and with crews that most child actors spend years trying to develop. By the time she was old enough to take on actual acting roles in film and television, she was already a seasoned professional in terms of her ease and confidence on set. Her early film career included roles in Paradise in 1991 and All I Want for Christmas in 1991, and she appeared in the family adventure film Patriot Games in 1992, where she played the daughter of Harrison Ford's character Jack Ryan. Playing alongside Harrison Ford in a major Hollywood production at the age of 10 was an extraordinary experience that further sharpened her instincts and her ability to hold her own in a scene with very experienced adult performers. In Hocus Pocus she played Danny Dennison, Max's younger sister, and her performance was one of the highlights of the entire film. Danny is a child character who could easily have been annoying or one-dimensional, the little sister who needs to be protected and who mostly just causes problems. But Birch played her as genuinely funny, sharp, emotionally real, and completely capable in her own right. Danny's relationship with Binks the cat is one of the film's most emotionally affecting threads, and Birch carried that relationship with a sincerity that made its resolution at the end of the film genuinely moving. Her career continued to build throughout the 1990s, and she reached the peak of her mainstream recognition with the film American Beauty in 1999. Directed by Sam Mendes and starring Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening, American Beauty was one of the most acclaimed films of its year, and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. Birch played Jane Burnham, the teenage daughter of Spacey's character, a girl navigating the disintegration of her family with a mixture of anger, vulnerability, and fierce self-protection. The performance was extraordinary for a 17-year-old actress. She was nominated for a BAFTA award for her work, and the film's success brought her enormous critical attention and recognition. She continued working in film and television through the 2000s, appearing in Ghost World in 2001, an adaptation of the graphic novel that earned considerable critical praise and in which she delivered another complex and nuanced performance. Her career took various turns through the following years, and she has spoken honestly about the challenges of building a sustained career in Hollywood, including the specific difficulties faced by young women in the industry as they transition from child and teenage roles into adult ones. She has remained connected to Hocus Pocus over the years, appearing at anniversary events and speaking warmly about the film and the experience of making it. She wrote the foreword to a book about the film published in 2016, which speaks to the genuine place it holds in her own story as an artist and a person. Doug Jones, Billy Butcherson. Doug Jones was born on May 24, 1960, in Indianapolis, Indiana. He grew up in a middle-class Midwestern family and from his earliest years showed a fascination with physical performance, mime, and movement that would eventually become the foundation of one of the most unusual and remarkable careers in Hollywood history. He attended Ball State University in Indiana, where he studied telecommunications, but his real education during those years was the time he spent developing his skills as a mime and physical performer. He is exceptionally tall and extremely slender, with a body that is almost unnaturally flexible and expressive, and he began to understand early on that his physical appearance and his ability to move in ways that most people simply cannot were going to be his greatest professional assets. After college, he moved to Los Angeles and began building a career that was unlike almost anyone else's. His extreme thinness and height and his extraordinary physicality made him a natural choice for roles that required actors to disappear entirely into prosthetic makeup and creature suits. He became one of the most sought-after performers in Hollywood for exactly this kind of work, the kind that almost no one else can do and that requires a very specific combination of physical capability, performance instinct, and extraordinary patience. His role as Billy Butcherson in Hocus Pocus in 1993 was one of his earlier film appearances, and it demonstrated everything that would make him so valuable to filmmakers. Playing a zombie with his lips sewn shut required him to communicate entirely through his body, his posture, his movement, and his eyes, and he did it with a warmth and a comic timing that made Billy one of the most unexpectedly charming characters in the film. The role that brought Doug Jones the widest recognition and the most critical attention was his work in the films of director Guillermo del Toro. Del Toro, who is one of the most visually inventive directors in cinema, recognized in Jones a performer of rare ability, and cast him repeatedly in his most ambitious projects. Jones played Abe Sapien in the Helba films, a fish-man creature of great intelligence and gentleness who communicates through subtle physical expression and a distinctive way of moving. He also played the Faun and the Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth, the extraordinary 2006 Spanish-language dark fantasy that became one of the most celebrated films of the decade. Playing two separate creatures in the same film, each with completely different physicality and personality, was a remarkable achievement that demonstrated the full range of Jones's abilities. He has gone on to play creatures, monsters, and non-human characters in dozens of films and television series, including The Shape of Water in 2017, another Del Toro film in which he played the Amphibian Man, a creature who forms a profound emotional connection with a mute woman played by Sally Hawkins. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and Jones's performance was rightly celebrated as one of its greatest achievements. Playing the central romantic figure in a film without being able to use words, relying entirely on physical performance and expression, and making audiences genuinely feel the emotional reality of the relationship is an extraordinary feat, and Jones accomplished it completely. He has also appeared as Commander Saru in the television series Star Trek: Discovery, which gave him the opportunity to play a fully humanoid character with dialogue and a rich emotional interior life, while still bringing the physical precision and specificity that defines everything he does. His career stands as a testament to what is possible when a performer fully commits to developing a genuinely unusual set of skills and finds the directors and projects that can make the best use of them. The making of Hocus Pocus and the funniest moments on set. How it all began and the long road to production. The story of how Hocus Pocus actually got made is almost as entertaining as the film itself. This was not a movie that came together smoothly or quickly. It was a project that spent nearly a decade sitting on a shelf, getting rewritten, getting rethought, getting passed around, and nearly dying completely before a single frame was ever shot. Understanding that long and complicated journey to production is essential to understanding why the finished film feels the way it does and why so many of the people involved in making it describe the experience with such fondness. The whole thing started with producer David Kirshner sitting in his backyard one evening with his young daughter. His neighbor's black cat wandered into the yard and Kirshner, in the spontaneous way that parents sometimes do, invented a story on the spot to tell his daughter. He told her that the cat had once been a boy who had been transformed into that feline form 300 years ago by 3 witches and was cursed to live forever as a cat. His daughter was enchanted by the story and Kirshner could not stop thinking about it afterward. He brought the concept to writer Mick Garris, and the two of them began developing it into a full screenplay. Walt Disney Pictures bought the script in 1984. Which was 9 years before the film was finally released. At that point in its development, the project was called Disney's Halloween House, and it was a considerably darker and more genuinely frightening story than what audiences eventually saw. The protagonists were all 12 years old, and the tone was much closer to a real horror film than a family comedy. Disney was interested but uncertain about how to proceed, and the project went through round after round of rewrites as different people at the studio tried to figure out what kind of film it was supposed to be. Over those years the script was worked on extensively. The decision was made to make the material more comedic and to age 2 of the main characters into teenagers. These changes helped clarify the tone, but the production kept stalling for various reasons. For almost an entire decade the project existed only on paper. A promising concept that nobody could quite figure out how to bring to life in a way that satisfied everyone involved. Everything changed in 1992 when Bette Midler read the script. Midler was one of the biggest and most respected entertainers in America at that point, and her interest in the project immediately changed its status within the studio. When someone of Midler's stature says she wants to make a film, the machinery around her starts moving. Director Kenny Ortega was brought on board, a casting process began in earnest, and the production that had been stalled for years suddenly had momentum it had never had before. The budget, and what it paid for. Hocus Pocus was made on a budget of approximately $28 million, which was a mid-range budget for a Disney live-action production in the early 1990s. It was not a small film by any means, but it was also not the kind of enormous blockbuster production that commanded the biggest budgets in Hollywood at the time. The money had to be spent carefully and creatively to achieve the visual ambitions the filmmakers had for the story. A significant portion of the budget went toward the practical special effects and makeup that were central to the look of the film. The 3 Sanderson sisters each required extensive costume and makeup work, and creating the visual of 3 17th-century witches that were simultaneously scary and funny and theatrical required a great deal of skilled craftsmanship. The witches' costumes were designed with enormous attention to period detail mixed with the deliberately exaggerated theatrical quality. Winifred's green and black ensemble, Mary's burgundy and brown layers, and Sarah's flowing purple and pink combination were all constructed to reflect each character's personality while also reading clearly and powerfully on screen. The black flame candle, Winifred's spell book, the various potions and cauldron effects, and the broomstick flying sequences all required practical effects work that consumed both money and time. The spell book in particular was a remarkable practical creation. The book needed to appear sentient, with a working eye on its cover that could open and close and move in response to what was happening around it. Creating a mechanical eye that worked reliably on camera and looked genuinely unsettling required significant technical work, and multiple versions of the prop were constructed to ensure there was always a working version available on set. The flying sequences required the actors to be rigged on wires and harnesses above sets and locations, and coordinating those sequences safely and effectively while maintaining the comedic energy the scenes required was a genuine technical challenge. Bette Midler flying on a vacuum cleaner, Kathy Najimy on a mop, and Sarah Jessica Parker on a broom all required precise wire work and careful coordination between the actors, the stunt teams, and the camera operators. The physical demands of those sequences on the three actresses were considerable, and all three of them have spoken about how uncomfortable and physically exhausting the wire work could be even when the results looked effortless on screen. The film was shot primarily on sound stages in Burbank, California, where the interior of the Sanderson cottage, the graveyard, and various other key locations were constructed as full sets. Building these environments from scratch gave the filmmakers complete control over every aspect of the visual design, from the lighting to the textures to the specific layout of every room and space. The Sanderson cottage interior in particular was a beautifully detailed piece of set design, full of period-appropriate props, hanging herbs and dried flowers, ancient books and bottles, and the atmospheric clutter of 3 centuries of which habitation. The daytime exterior scenes that required the actual look and feel of Salem, Massachusetts, were filmed on location in Salem itself and in the nearby town of Marblehead. 2 weeks of location shooting gave the film the authentic New England atmosphere that made Salem feel genuinely real rather than a Hollywood approximation of it. The town of Salem cooperated with the production, and the presence of a Disney film crew in the area during those 2 weeks was a significant local event. The musical elements of the film also required budget allocation. The iconic sequence in which Bette Midler performs a bewitching version of "I Put a Spell on You" at the Halloween party was one of the most carefully planned and executed sequences in the entire production. The arrangement of the song was specially created for the film, and Midler's performance was recorded and planned with meticulous attention to how it would be choreographed, staged, and filmed. This single sequence required multiple days of filming and significant coordination between the music team, the choreographers, the costume department, and the camera crew. When the film was released on July 16, 1993, it opened in 4th place at the box office with approximately $8.1 million. Its total domestic gross came to around $39.5 million, which against a $28 million production budget plus marketing and distribution costs meant that the film was considered a financial disappointment. Disney was estimated to have lost approximately $16.5 million on the theatrical run. However, as home video sales accumulated over the following years and the film became a Halloween television staple, it eventually recouped its costs many times over and became one of the most profitable catalog titles in Disney's entire library. The funny and chaotic moments on set. The set of Hocus Pocus has been described by virtually everyone who was on it as one of the most joyful and chaotic filming experiences of their careers, and a great deal of that joy and chaos came directly from the 3 women at the center of it all. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy formed a genuinely close and deeply funny trio both on and off camera, and the energy between them spilled over constantly from the scenes they were performing into the spaces between takes and the hours of waiting that are an inevitable part of any film production. Bette Midler was the undisputed ringleader of the chaos. She arrived on set every single day with a level of energy that reportedly left everyone around her slightly exhausted just trying to keep up with it. She was always performing, always finding new things to do with Winifred, always pushing the comedy further and finding new angles on the character that had not been in the script. Directors and crew members who worked on the film have described the experience of working with Midler as being like trying to direct a force of nature. You could point her in a general direction, but what she did once she got there was very much her own invention. One of the most frequently told stories from the set involves the flying sequences. Getting Bette Midler into a wire harness and lifting her above the set was an experience that generated considerable amusement for everyone involved, particularly because Midler herself had strong opinions about every aspect of the process. She was famously uncomfortable with the wire work and was not shy about expressing that discomfort in extremely colorful and theatrical terms. The crew quickly learned that the best approach was to move quickly, get her into position efficiently, and be very responsive when she indicated she was done. Her complaints were always delivered with enough humor that they became part of the entertainment of the day rather than genuine problems. but she was very clear that nobody should mistake her good humor for actual enjoyment of hanging in a harness above a film set. Sarah Jessica Parker, by contrast, seemed to genuinely enjoy the more physically demanding aspects of the production. She was enthusiastic about the flying sequences and threw herself into the wire work with an energy that impressed the stunt coordinators. However, Parker had her own set of challenges, primarily related to the character of Sarah Sanderson herself. Sarah is a character who exists in a kind of permanent dreamy haze, detached from reality and responding to everything around her with a slightly delayed and always unexpected reaction. Parker found it surprisingly difficult to sustain this particular mental state take after take, and she has talked about the work it took to keep finding her way back into Sarah's very specific kind of vagueness every time the camera rolled. Between takes she was sharp and present and funny, and then she would have to find her way back to that floating, unfocused quality that defined the character. There is a widely shared story about Parker's singing of "Come Little Children," the haunting lullaby that Sarah uses to draw children toward the witches. The song is genuinely beautiful and genuinely eerie, and Parker's voice suits it perfectly. But recording and filming the sequence required many takes and a great deal of technical coordination, and at various points during the process Parker reportedly broke into completely different and entirely inappropriate songs between takes, to the enormous amusement of the crew. There was apparently a period during filming where Parker had the lullaby so thoroughly stuck in her own head that she could not stop singing it even when she was trying to have a normal conversation, which she found deeply annoying and which everyone around her found deeply funny. Kathy Najimy brought a physical comedian's instinct to every day on set and was constantly discovering new things to do with Mary Sanderson's body and voice and manner. Mary's habit of sniffing out children with her nose, a kind of animal-like scenting behavior, was something Najimy developed and elaborated on throughout production. She would find new and increasingly extreme versions of the sniffing in rehearsals and takes, and many of these improvisations ended up in the film. The crew reportedly looked forward to seeing what variation Najimy would bring to any given take because it was almost always different from the previous one and almost always funnier. The dynamic between the three women was genuinely like that of sisters in certain ways. They bickered and teased each other and competed for laughs in a way that was completely good-natured but also very real. Midler was always aware of where the camera was and how a scene was being framed, and she had strong instincts about how to make sure Winifred was the visual and comedic center of every shared scene. Parker and Najimy both understood this and navigated it with humor, finding ways to make their own moments land within the space that Midler's enormous presence created. Rather than creating tension, this dynamic actually improved the performances because it kept all three actresses sharp and competitive, in the best possible way. There were several moments during production where the three women simply could not get through a take without breaking into genuine laughter. This happened most frequently during scenes that were already at the extreme end of the comedy, where the witch's bewilderment at the modern world was being played for maximum absurdity. The scene in which the witches encounter a bus for the first time and Winifred describes it in magnificently wrong historical terms was apparently nearly impossible to film without someone dissolving. Midler's delivery of her lines in that sequence was different in almost every take, and some of the variations she came up with between cuts were reportedly so funny that the crew could not keep their composure either. The children on set, Omri Katz, Thora Birch, and Vanessa Shaw, were in the interesting position of being surrounded by three of the most experienced and enthusiastic comic performers in the business, all of whom were having the time of their lives. Thora Birch in particular, who was 11 years old during filming, has described the experience as being unlike anything she had encountered before. She was already an experienced child actress with considerable credits to her name, but the energy of those three women was something she had not previously encountered, and she has spoken about how much she learned simply by watching them work, and watching how they found humor in every moment. Doug Jones, who played Billy Butcherson with his mouth sewn shut for the majority of his scenes, had his own unique set of challenges that generated considerable sympathy and amusement on set in roughly equal measure. The zombie makeup he wore required hours in the makeup chair each morning, and the prosthetics covering his face and body limited his ability to communicate, eat, drink, and generally be comfortable in any normal way. He could not eat a full meal while in makeup, could not drink easily, and had to communicate with crew members through a combination of gestures and written notes during particularly intensive makeup days. He has described the experience with great warmth and humor, noting that the discomfort was completely worth it, but that arriving at the end of each filming day and having the prosthetics removed was one of the great physical reliefs of his professional life. One of the most beloved behind-the-scenes stories from the production involves the spellbook prop. The mechanical eye in the cover of the book, which had to open and close and move in response to what was happening in the scene, was operated by a puppeteer working just off camera. The puppeteer and the book became something of a character in their own right on set, because the mechanism occasionally malfunctioned in ways that were deeply unhelpful to the scene being filmed but were objectively very funny to everyone watching. There were apparently several takes ruined by the book's eye getting stuck open, or closing at entirely the wrong moment, or moving in a direction that made it look like the book was deeply confused about what was happening. These mechanical failures became a running joke throughout production, with crew members anthropomorphizing the book's malfunctions and treating them as if the book itself had opinions about the scenes it was being used in. Kenny Ortega as a director was known on set for his high energy and his genuine enthusiasm for every aspect of the production. He had extensive experience as a choreographer before becoming a director, and this background influenced the way he approached every sequence in the film, not just the musical ones. He thought carefully about the movement of actors within the frame and was very attentive to the physical comedy of the witches' interactions with each other and with the modern world. He was also known for his ability to maintain a positive and creative atmosphere even when things were going wrong, which on a production as technically complex as this one was a genuinely valuable skill. The production team worked with extraordinary dedication to make the world of the film feel as specific and atmospheric as possible on what was ultimately a mid-range budget. The costume department in particular has received extensive praise from everyone involved for the quality and detail of the work they did on the witches' outfits. Each costume had to be durable enough to survive the physical demands of the production, flexible enough to allow the actresses to move and perform freely, and visually striking enough to read clearly and memorably on screen. Achieving all three of those things simultaneously across three separate and very different costumes was a significant accomplishment. The filming of the "I Put a Spell on You" sequence was a landmark moment in the production that everyone present has described as extraordinary to witness in person. Midler rehearsed the number extensively and then, when it came time to film it, delivered a performance that was so powerful and so complete that it essentially stopped the set. The extras and crew members watching her work were genuinely affected by it in a way that goes beyond the normal professional relationship between a performer and the people around her. This was Bette Midler doing exactly what Bette Midler was born to do, in a setting specifically designed for her to do it in, and the result was something that everyone who was there has carried with them ever since. When filming wrapped in February of 1993, the overall feeling among the cast and crew was one of genuine warmth and satisfaction. Whatever the film's commercial fate might turn out to be, the experience of making it had been a genuinely happy one. Midler, Parker, and Najimy had formed a bond during production that all three of them have spoken about with real affection in the years since. The film holds a special place for everyone who made it, not just because of what it became in the culture but because of what it was for them personally during those months of shooting. The fact that the film went on to become one of the most beloved Halloween films of all time, finding the audience it was always meant to find through years of television airings and home video, and eventually streaming, gave everyone involved a very particular kind of satisfaction. This was a film that the people who made it believed in even when the critical reception and the initial box office suggested they were wrong to believe in it. They were not wrong. They were just early. The cultural and historical significance of Hocus Pocus. Where it all begins, the real Salem and its dark history. To truly understand Hocus Pocus as a cultural and historical document, you have to go back not to 1993 when the film was made, but to the real Salem, Massachusetts, and the genuine historical events that gave the town its dark and lasting reputation. Because Hocus Pocus is not just a silly Halloween comedy set in a random American town. It is a film that chose its setting with full awareness of what that setting meant, and everything about the story is shaped by the real history of the place in which it unfolds. Salem, Massachusetts, is one of the oldest towns in the United States. It was established in 1626 by English settlers who came to the New World seeking religious freedom and a new life, and for much of its early history it was a relatively ordinary Puritan community on the northeastern coast of what would eventually become America. The people who lived there were deeply religious, deeply suspicious of anything they could not explain through their faith, and deeply afraid of the devil and the forces they believed he could deploy against righteous Christian communities. In 1692, something happened in Salem that would make it famous for the rest of human history. A group of young girls in the town began exhibiting strange behavior. They had fits, they screamed, they claimed they could see things that no one else could see, and they began accusing members of the community of being witches who were tormenting them through supernatural means. The accusations spread. More people were accused. The community, gripped by fear and religious hysteria, responded by arresting the accused and putting them on trial. What followed was one of the most disturbing episodes in American history. The Salem witch trials of 1692 resulted in the execution of 19 people, 14 women and 5 men, who were hanged after being convicted of witchcraft on the basis of testimony that would not be considered credible in any court of law by any modern standard. One additional person, a man named Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones when he refused to enter a plea. Dozens more were imprisoned and suffered terribly before the hysteria finally burned itself out toward the end of 1692 and into 1693. The causes of the Salem witch trials have been debated by historians for more than 3 centuries. Some have pointed to a fungal infection called ergot that can contaminate rye bread and cause hallucinations and convulsive symptoms similar to what the afflicted girls displayed. Others have pointed to social tensions within the community, disputes over land and property, personal rivalries, and the particular psychological pressure of Puritan religious culture. Still others have focused on the role of fear, mass hysteria, and the human tendency to look for a scapegoat when a community is under stress. Most historians today believe the answer involves several of these factors working together rather than any single cause. What is historically significant about this is that Hocus Pocus is explicitly set in this exact context. The film opens in 1693, which is not a randomly chosen date. It is the year that follows the height of the witch trials, a period when the memory of those events would have been raw and immediate in the community. The Sanderson Sisters are hanged by the townspeople of Salem, which directly mirrors the real historical executions that took place in that town. The film takes the historical reality of what happened in Salem and uses it as the foundation for a supernatural story that asks what if those executed women had actually been witches after all. This is a fascinating and complex imaginative move. The real victims of the Salem witch trials were innocent people, mostly women, who were executed because of fear, superstition, and social dysfunction. Hocus Pocus takes the figure of the Salem witch and makes her genuinely real and genuinely dangerous, which in one sense inverts the historical truth of the trials. But it also does something more interesting than simple inversion. By setting the story in a world where witches are real but also comical and ultimately defeated, the film participates in a long tradition of using supernatural storytelling to process historical trauma in a way that is safe enough to be entertaining. The Puritans and what they believed. Understanding Hocus Pocus culturally requires understanding the Puritan world that the film's opening sequence depicts. The Puritans were English Protestant Christians who believed that the Church of England had not gone far enough in its separation from Catholicism and who sought to purify Christianity of what they saw as corrupt practices and beliefs. Many of them came to America in the early 17th century seeking the freedom to practice their faith without interference, and they established communities in New England that were organized around strict religious principles. Puritan theology held that the world was a battlefield between God and the devil, and that the devil was constantly working to corrupt and destroy righteous Christian communities. The concept of witchcraft, in Puritan belief, was not a superstition or a fantasy. It was a theological reality. They genuinely believed that people could make covenants with the devil and receive supernatural powers in exchange for their souls. The Bible itself contained references to witchcraft and condemned it, and the Puritans took these references with absolute literalness. This is the world that Thackeray Binks lives in at the beginning of Hocus Pocus. When he sees his sister being drawn into the forest and encounters the Sanderson Sisters in their cottage, he is experiencing something that his entire cultural and religious framework has told him is real and possible. The terror he feels is not the terror of encountering something impossible. It is the terror of encountering something he has been warned about his entire life actually happening in front of him. The film captures the visual and atmospheric qualities of this Puritan world with considerable attention. The costumes, the architecture of the village, the torches carried by the townspeople, and the speed with which the community moves from fear to collective action all reflect a genuine understanding of how Puritan communities functioned and how they responded to perceived supernatural threats. There is no deliberation in Salem when the townspeople decide to arrest and execute the Sanderson Sisters. The community moves as one body, driven by a shared belief system that makes the execution of witches not a moral question but a straightforward duty. The figure of the witch in Western culture. The witch as a cultural figure has one of the longest and most complex histories in Western civilization, and Hocus Pocus sits within that history in a very specific and interesting way. The image of the witch, an old woman with supernatural powers who uses them for destructive and selfish ends, appears in the folklore and mythology of virtually every European culture. She is the bad fairy, the wicked stepmother, the hag in the forest, the woman whose knowledge and power exist outside the boundaries of what polite society will accept. Historically, the figure of the witch was used to police the boundaries of acceptable female behavior. Women who were too old, too independent, too knowledgeable about herbs and medicine, too sexually autonomous, or too socially deviant in any number of ways were vulnerable to accusations of witchcraft in European and early American culture. The witch trials that took place across Europe and in Salem were not random outbreaks of collective madness. They were expressions of deep social anxieties about gender, power, and the female body, expressed through the available cultural and theological frameworks of the time. Hocus Pocus engages with this history in a way that is playful but not entirely unaware of its weight. The Sanderson sisters are powerful women who exist entirely outside the boundaries of what their society will accept. They do not answer to men, they do not submit to community norms, they pursue their own desires without apology, and they use knowledge and power that their society has deemed forbidden. In this sense they fit the historical profile of the accused witch almost perfectly. The film does not ask its audience to sympathize with them, because their evil is genuine and their victims are real. But it does present them as figures of a certain kind of outrageous freedom, women who refuse to be small or contained or obedient, and there is something in that portrayal that resonates with audiences in ways that go beyond simple villainy. Bette Midler has spoken about Winifred Sanderson in terms that suggest she understood this dimension of the character. Winifred is theatrical, commanding, brilliant in her own dark way, and completely unapologetic about who she is and what she wants. She is not a figure of shame. She is a figure of tremendous, if twisted, vitality. and the fact that she and her sisters are played by three of the most talented and charismatic women in American entertainment gives the characters an additional layer of cultural resonance that the film might not have achieved with a less distinguished cast. The witch figure in popular culture began to shift significantly in the 20th century. From being a figure of fear and evil, the witch gradually became a figure of empowerment, mystery, and alternative feminine power. This shift is visible in everything from the popular television series Bewitched in the 1960s to the Wicca movement that grew significantly in the late 20th century. By the time Hocus Pocus was made in 1993, audiences were already primed to find something appealing in the figure of the powerful witch, even a villainous one, and the film benefited enormously from this cultural shift. Halloween as an American cultural institution. Hocus Pocus is also one of the most significant American films ever made about Halloween itself as a cultural practice, and understanding what Halloween means in American culture helps explain why the film has become such an enduring part of it. Halloween in America has roots that go back to the Celtic festival of Samhain, which was observed by the ancient Celtic peoples of what is now Ireland, Scotland, and parts of northern France. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, and the Celts believed that on the night of October 31st the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead became thin and permeable. Spirits could cross over, and the living needed to take precautions to protect themselves from malevolent supernatural entities. When Irish and Scottish immigrants came to America in large numbers during the 19th century, particularly during and after the Great Famine of the 1840s, they brought their Halloween traditions with them. These traditions mixed with the existing folk customs of other immigrant communities in America and gradually evolved into the distinctly American form of Halloween that we recognize today, with its candy, costumes, jack-o'-lanterns, and community-wide celebrations. By the 20th century, Halloween had become one of the most commercially significant holidays in the American calendar. The candy industry, the costume industry, and the decoration industry all built enormous businesses around the holiday. Television networks began programming Halloween-themed content in October, and a specific genre of Halloween film emerged that was designed to be watched during the season. Hocus Pocus was made explicitly within this tradition and has become perhaps the defining example of it. What makes the film so effective as a Halloween cultural artifact is that it takes the actual mythology of Halloween seriously while also finding tremendous comedy in it. The idea that on Halloween night the boundaries between the living and the dead are permeable, that ancient evil can be resurrected, that children are in particular danger from supernatural forces. All of these are genuine elements of Halloween's mythological heritage. Hocus Pocus uses all of them and places them in a recognizably modern American Halloween setting, complete with trick-or-treaters, Halloween parties, carved pumpkins, and costumed adults who cannot tell the difference between a real witch and a very committed Halloween costume. The result is a film that feels deeply connected to the actual cultural meaning of Halloween in a way that many Halloween films do not. Salem as a cultural destination and its relationship with the film. The relationship between Hocus Pocus and the actual city of Salem, Massachusetts, is one of the most interesting cultural stories connected to the film. Salem has always had a complicated relationship with its own history. The witch trials of 1692 are a source of genuine shame and grief for many people, a reminder of what fear and superstition can lead a community to do to innocent people. At the same time, that history has made Salem one of the most visited tourist destinations in New England, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors every October who come to experience the atmosphere of the town and engage with its dark past. Hocus Pocus both reflected and significantly amplified this cultural identity of Salem. By setting a major Disney film there and depicting it as a place where genuine witchcraft was historically practiced and where the supernatural is always just beneath the surface of ordinary life, the film gave Salem's Halloween identity a mainstream cultural endorsement that it had never quite had before. After the film was released and especially after it became a cult classic through repeated television airings, Salem became increasingly associated in the popular imagination, specifically with the Sanderson Sisters and the world of the film. Today, Salem leans into this association enthusiastically. There are Hocus Pocus tours, Hocus Pocus merchandise, and various events and experiences themed around the film that draw visitors specifically because of their love of the movie. The Sanderson Sisters have become part of Salem's public identity in a way that the real historical figures of the witch trials never quite managed in popular culture. This is a strange and somewhat ironic outcome given that the film is a fantasy with no historical basis, but it speaks to the enormous power that popular culture can have in shaping how places understand and present themselves. The city has celebrated the film's anniversaries and welcomed cast members back for events. The relationship between the film and the city has become genuinely symbiotic, each one feeding the other's cultural identity and drawing visitors and attention that benefits both. The cult classic phenomenon, and what it means culturally. Perhaps the most culturally significant thing about Hocus Pocus is not anything in the film itself, but what happened to it after it was released. The transformation of Hocus Pocus from a box office disappointment and critical failure into one of the most beloved films in Disney's catalog is one of the most remarkable stories in American popular culture, and it says something important about how culture actually works and how audiences relate to the films they love. When Hocus Pocus was released in July 1993 and failed to perform at the box office, the conventional wisdom was that it was a minor and forgettable piece of work. The critics had dismissed it, the audiences had largely ignored it, and Disney had moved on. But the film found its way onto television, particularly on cable channels that programmed Halloween content aggressively every October. Disney Channel and later ABC Family and Freeform began airing the film as part of their Halloween programming blocks, and something unexpected started happening. Children who were too young to have seen the film in theaters were discovering it at home. They were watching it on television on October evenings, often with their families, and they were falling in love with it. The witches were funny and scary in just the right proportions. The story was exciting but not traumatizing. The setting was atmospheric and perfectly suited to the Halloween season. And something about the combination of those elements, the specific mixture of spookiness and warmth and comedy and heart, resonated with young audiences in a way that created deep and lasting emotional attachments. Those children grew up. They became teenagers and adults who still remembered Hocus Pocus with tremendous fondness. They introduced it to their own younger siblings and eventually to their own children. The film became a tradition, something that families watched together every October the way other families might put up specific decorations or bake specific foods. It became woven into the fabric of how millions of American families experienced Halloween. This is the mechanism by which cult classics are made. Not through critical recognition or commercial success, but through repeated personal encounters over time, through the accumulation of individual emotional memories that gradually add up to a shared cultural experience. Hocus Pocus is one of the clearest examples of this process in American film history, and studying how it happened tells you a great deal about how popular culture actually functions as opposed to how the entertainment industry assumes it functions. By the time of the film's 25th anniversary in 2018, it was drawing millions of television viewers every October. By its 30th anniversary in 2023, it was being re-released in theaters to audiences who had grown up with it and wanted the experience of seeing it on the big screen for the first time. The sequel Hocus Pocus 2, released on Disney Plus in 2022, was one of the most watched streaming releases of that year, demonstrating that the audience for this world and these characters had not diminished but had in fact continued to grow. Feminism and the Sanderson Sisters as cultural figures. One of the most interesting cultural conversations that has grown up around Hocus Pocus over the years concerns the Sanderson Sisters as feminist icons, a reading of the characters that the filmmakers almost certainly did not intend but that has become increasingly prominent as the film has been revisited by successive generations of viewers. The three sisters are the most powerful, most capable, most creative, and most memorable characters in the film. They are women who answer to no one, who pursue their own desires without apology, who have mastered knowledge and skills that their society deemed forbidden, and who work together as a unit with a loyalty and solidarity that transcends their individual differences and disagreements. They bicker, they frustrate each other, and Winifred in particular is absolutely tyrannical toward her sisters. But they are also completely committed to each other, and to their shared survival. And there is something genuinely compelling about watching three women operate with such complete confidence, and such utter disregard for what anyone else thinks of them. This reading of the characters has been helped enormously by the performances. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy are all women who have had long and significant careers built on talent, intelligence, and a refusal to be limited by conventional expectations. Something of their own personal energy comes through in their performances, and audiences have responded to it. The Sanderson Sisters have become popular Halloween costume choices not just because they look great, but because dressing as them feels like an act of claiming something, a particular kind of boldness and confidence and theatrical self-expression. Bette Midler herself has spoken about the Sanderson Sisters in these terms, noting that what draws people to the characters is precisely their refusal to be small or apologetic. In a culture that often asks women to be modest and self-effacing, three women who are catastrophically, magnificently, unrepentantly themselves represent something that resonates far beyond the specific context of a Halloween fantasy comedy. The film's place in Disney's cultural history. Hocus Pocus occupies a specific and interesting place within the broader history of Disney as a cultural institution. Disney in 1993 was in the middle of what is often called the Disney Renaissance, a period of extraordinary creative and commercial success in animation that included The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. These films were redefining what animated family entertainment could be and were achieving both critical acclaim and enormous box office success. Hocus Pocus was a live-action production made during this same period, and its relative failure at the time of release was partly a product of the context it existed in. Disney's energy and attention in 1993 were largely focused on the animated side of the studio's output, and the live-action division was not operating at the same level of creative or commercial confidence. Hocus Pocus was made and released somewhat without the full weight of Disney's promotional and creative resources behind it, which contributed to its initial underperformance. But the film's subsequent success as a cult classic has given it a significance within Disney's catalog that it did not have on release. It is now one of the titles most closely associated with the Disney brand in the public imagination, more recognizable and more beloved by many audiences than some of the films that were considered far more important at the time of their release. This says something interesting about the unpredictability of cultural longevity, and the limits of commercial success as a measure of a film's actual value and meaning to the people who watch it. The legacy and what it tells us about American culture. Hocus Pocus endures because it touches something real in American culture. It takes the genuine history of Salem and the genuine mythology of Halloween and the genuine cultural figure of the witch and wraps them all in a story that is warm and funny and emotionally satisfying in ways that transcend the specific details of its plot. It is a film about siblings protecting each other, about the value of believing in things even when the people around you do not, about the importance of standing up against evil even when you are completely unqualified to do so, and about the particular magic of Halloween as a time when the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary become thin and permeable. These themes are not accidental. They are rooted in the real cultural and historical soil of Salem and New England and the American experience of Halloween, and they are why the film continues to grow in significance with every passing year rather than fading into the obscurity that its initial reception suggested it deserved. Hocus Pocus is a film that knows where it comes from and what it is about, and that knowledge, combined with the extraordinary performances at its center, and the genuine craft of its production, is what has made it one of the most culturally significant Halloween films ever made.